So everybody, would you give a very warm welcome, please, to Niamh Bushnell. There she is.
Thank you.
And to Emmett Connolly. Hi, Emmett. And to Fiach McAneel. Hiya, Fiach.
Hey.
And to Carlin Lillington. I'm just going to go around and ask you all to introduce yourselves rather than me do it. Emmett, tell me a little bit about yourself, who you are and what you do.
I'm Emmett Connolly. I'm a digital product designer. I work with Intercom. We're a startup. We have offices based here in Dublin and in San Francisco. I run the product design team at Intercom. Before that, I was out abroad quite a bit. I worked for Google. I worked in Zurich and in San Francisco as a designer. I designed Google Search and Google. I also co-founded Google's wearable computing project and designed that and launched it.
Right.
We're going now. I'm going.
Niamh Bushnell. Tell me all about yourself, Niamh.
I am in my last 24 hours as Dublin Commissioner for Startups.
The very first one.
The very first one. Hopefully there'll be more. My next role is to be CEO of an organisation called Tech Ireland, techireland.org, that starts on Monday, and we will be telling the story of people like Emmett.
Not me personally.
Hopefully you personally too. And the reason for Tech Ireland is that one of the biggest challenges I had in my role as Commissioner was that we have this kind of hackneyed, broken record story about Ireland, which is not an innovation brand and talks about our levels of ambition as a tech economy being very low, and neither of those things are true. So we're changing that with data and with stories and by mapping the whole country from an innovation product perspective. I'm just really happy to be here and really happy to be back and living in Ireland after 16 years in the States.
Okay, right. Thank you, Niamh. Fiach, tell me about yourself and tell me what you're doing now.
Now I am CEO of the Digital Hub, which is Ireland's largest cluster of digital and technology companies, and it's situated in Dublin 8, and it's a combination of working with both multinational and indigenous startups and emerging companies, rooted in a historic part of the city and the liberties, and working with the local community, encouraging these clusters to stay and work and engage with the local community and try and change the fabric for the better in Thomas Street and James Street. So that's what I'm doing now. I'm also supporting this great person by my side, Niamh, in taking over some of her legacy work. Behind that, I worked for maybe over 25 years with artists. I've been working with artists really most of my life. I'm a son and a grandson of an artist. But yeah, I'll stop talking now.
Right, good. And would you welcome Carlin Lillington? Carlin, we read you regularly in the Irish Times. Just tell me a little bit about your background, how you landed up here, and what you're at.
Yeah, I started. Taxi drivers always nail this right away. Dublin taxi drivers are amazing at picking up accents. I was born in Canada, which is which they always get, because I say out and about and not out and about like an American. But I grew up in the States. I had one Canadian parent, one American parent. And I think I grew up into the original gig economy jobs, because I went to university thinking I would study science, switched into arts and did an English literature degree, then got interested in journalism and design, as in publication design, then was debating, well, will I go to arts college and do the design side, or will I maybe go and do some postgraduate work in Ireland? Because I had some really good teachers in Irish literature, Anglo-Irish literature to be the correct term. And I ended up over here to do a one-year course in Anglo-Irish literature in 1984, and I'm still here.
Wow.
And decided as a stopgap job to go back to journalism so I could stay in Ireland before I did my formal examination, my viva, and as often happens, the stopgap job becomes your career. And I stumbled into technology, and that, just as it was taking off in Ireland, I thought, oh my God, what is happening here? In the having been in Ireland in the 80s and the grim 80s, suddenly the 90s were taking off, and here I am.
Here you are, and never going to go.
It seems not at this point.
Well, let's begin with the question. The question of the evening is, does Ireland have an edge of some sort? Has it got something that makes it attractive? Has it got something that makes it considerable, a consideration? Emmett, let me start with you. You left, Emmett. Mm-hmm. So just to address that simple question, does Ireland have an edge of some sort in your view?
Yeah, well, for me it was interesting to hear some of the previous comments about the edge, and I suppose any edge is defined by the centre, and so you said I left to kind of follow what was sort of a personal dream of mine, to go towards that centre of what was my passion, technology. So that was ultimately how I wound my way to San Francisco and Silicon Valley, and to follow my interest there. I suppose I was very drawn to it by some of the origin myths of where the modern personal computing industry came from. My experience moving there turned out to be very differently. I think in many ways I turned up to the party I was expecting 30, 40 years too late. So it's kind of become very corporatized and commercialized. I guess when I think about the edge then, the center has become very locked down in terms of what it is now, and it's lost some of that sense of counterculture or experimentation, in my opinion, compared to what I was expecting of it. But the interesting stuff happens at the fringes, doesn't it? And so
it does.
That's which is obviously the theme, Yeah. But I guess that is what is at least partially the opportunity here, where the culture isn't so locked down, and so you can start to ask, what are the more creative things that you can do with that material? That stuff's going to happen at the edge, or that stuff just doesn't have a chance to breathe at the center anymore. It doesn't have the oxygen, the breathing room, the flexibility it needs. So that's kind of the
something that was more creative than being sort of in the center of things. Niamh, you went and came back as well. Tell me a little bit about your story of going and coming. And you said when we were chatting a little earlier on that it's just so wonderful to be in Ireland, and what draws you here and what energizes you here, and makes you want to work here.
Yeah, well, I think I have an experience that I think a lot of people who leave the country when they're younger have. I went to New York and I felt like I was in the center of the universe, and I consciously felt that every single day for a very long time, for maybe 5 or 8 years. Every single day I felt, I'm in the center of the universe, I'm loving this, this is amazing, this is amazing. But as I got older, and I was there in total for 16 years, from 98 to 2014, I felt I was moving more and more towards an edge that I wasn't interested in, and losing more and more of the center of who I was. And that center was here. And as time moved on, it was harder and harder to ignore the center that I really wanted to find, and there was only one way of doing that, and that was to come back and try and live here again. So I just feel, in my circumstance, and I know loads of other people who feel the same way, that we just feel such a privilege to have been able to go out, but to come back and to live here and to make a life here and into the future, and I just feel really lucky.
And what's exciting about here now?
Well, I think it's kind of like what Emmett is saying. It's not all corporate and done. I mean, and that was probably why I felt like I was going towards the edge more and more in the States as well. We're an open economy, but we're also a really open society, and everything is kind of touchable and connectable, and people are easy, and it's funny, But that was something that I always thought. Yeah, when I go to Ireland, I have to I really have to, every turn of phrase, every little text, people are funnier. And humor is smart and creative and open, and there's so much opportunity within humor to do so much, and there's just such a massive amount of creativity here in all different guises, and when you grow up with that, you miss it.
And can we translate that into something? Fiach, maybe you could talk to that, that now there is a public policy for the first time. Why was it important for you?
I'm studying public policy at the moment in UCD. Public policy doesn't necessarily mean to centralise it or to aggregate it or to somehow sanitise it. It's to acknowledge that on the outlier of our community, yes, another C, is creativity. And we need to, leave it there, but connect to it. Realise that there's confusion there. The centre doesn't work unless it can aggregate and appropriate what's happening on the edge or what's happening on the fringe, or to find sense into confusion on the edge, that the actual fringe and the edge is somewhere that needs to remain, needs to be there. It's transitionary all the time. It's to do with age. I can no longer say that I'm at the edge when I ran the Project Art Centre, but I can say I'm in the centre of another edge, which gives me a kind of a new life force, which is the edge of what's happening in technology, the edge of the conversations. The challenge for public policy is to watch that, monitor that, support it. But the challenge for us in the city, another C, is to somehow let it thrive without too much interference.
Carolyn,
which is a K.
Does Ireland have an edge?
Ireland definitely has an edge, and I think from my own. From the point of view of what I've done with the last 20-something years of my life, the technology developments here illustrate that perfectly, because why would companies come to this really small country if there wasn't something that was quite unique, if there weren't many things that were quite unique here? And so you often get this, you'll get this very cynical view of it's low tax, or it's secret deals from the government or whatever. But really, what I would say over and over is there's something that's in some ways less tangible, but perhaps could be more tangible. And I would say things like problem solving was something I was thinking about. The Irish are incredibly good at problem solving and digital. One of the original big tech companies to come here long before a lot of other tech companies came here. They came here, and what gradually over time the company realized the Irish are really good at was re-engineering existing products. So Ireland wasn't creating the cutting edge thing that we were putting out on the market. Instead, it was something that maybe was a few years old and would end up out in Galway at Digital, and those engineers would look at it and go, the technology's advanced a bit. We can actually take this and make it even better. Ireland, for whatever reason, there was something that we do really well here that enabled a very efficient production, some sort of problem solving, some sort of ability there. And Apple would have been the same. I talked to a couple of people who were managers very early on in Apple who said Steve Jobs would send out new products, and pre-Steve Jobs as well, to be run through the Irish manufacturing arm just because they thought Ireland tends to work out the most efficient way to produce this thing. And now it might not end up being permanently produced in Ireland, even though we built a lot of computers here, but they'd say, let's send it to Ireland and have them try to figure stuff out. And these are really interesting stories that I think aren't generally known. Clearly this is a real skill that is here. And I don't know why.
Emmett, we were talking last night, and Fiach referred to education in two spheres: third level education with Brian and what he's doing at DCU, and primary level education as well. But we also talked about the speed at which technology is changing. I sign up for the course, and by the time I graduate and get my degree, the design of the course has fallen behind entirely the developments that have taken place in the technological space. What are we going to do about that?
In general, it's very difficult to design an educational program, like you said, for exactly the reason you said, that can kind of keep pace with this crazy exponential change. How do you teach people to learn on an ongoing basis? Because whatever you learn this year is going to be obsolete. Not obsolete, but usurped by something more important.
So sort of
in
a
couple of years.
self-learning.
No one was talking about AI and machine learning really 3 years ago, and you know, a few years ago, virtual reality, which seems like it might be a new, amazingly interesting thing, was this jaded, failed 90s technology that never came to pass after a load of hype.
I have two more questions, and one is a sort of a three-part question. I said, what is your view of the future?
Sixth question.
What's the future we're getting ready for?
That's past maths, is it?
Right, past maths, yeah. This is past maths.
Where's
this
that made?
This is senior Wexford hurling, Eamon. Right? What's your view of the future? What's the future we're getting ready for? And have we the equipment for that future?
I think that technology is changing things in a lot more ways than just like the devices that we use, all of the second order effects of technology in terms of globalization and a result of what happens when all of the world's countries become connected and leveled and have a great deal of insight into what is happening in all the other countries.
But I said, are we ready for that?
I don't know if it matters. In some way, it's a tsunami. You know what I mean?
Sure.
And so there's a thing in technology that tends to think of like technology is this linear path that we're all on together, and that the solution to problems created by technology is more technology. And that's not necessarily the case. It may be the case of taking that technology, like Harlan was saying, and saying, what can we do? What can we make out of this? You know, so you don't necessarily need to be the creator of the raw technology, but can you make something out of that material in the same way that Carolyn was saying about can you do something more efficient or more interesting or different with it? I think that's an opportunity at the edge as well.
Right, that's one, yeah, right. Niamh, same question.
Well, I can answer all three with one answer, which is I'm not interested in the future. I'm a nowist, and there's plenty enough going on right now to be engaged with that will allow us to be in a better place in the future. And I'm interested in how technology companies and technology in general is getting a conscience about what it is and how it can be a real contributor to society, and not just hey, we're the good guys and all the bad guys are somewhere else. No, you are the players. The economies of the world are now predicated on what you're choosing to do, everything from infrastructure to apps on your phone to everything else, to the way money moves hands, to the way security is managed. So technology has become the be-all and end-all, and we've got to start figuring out what that means ethically and socially for everybody. And the companies themselves are the political. They're not the new politicians, but they are playing a political game, and they need to recognise their responsibility in that. And that's a very now thing.
Hey.
Thank you.
Fiach.
Well, I take heart in what both Emmett and Niamh say. I think to add, what I've learned from Emmett is the word iterative. Let's not panic about the future. The word iterative means that as we continue to engage with the present, it starts to make more and more sense to us, and we will start to progress, whether it's through technology or understanding of creativity. In the Digital Hub, we work with extraordinary young people in an area called Future. It's a program called Future Creators, and it's working with 16 to 18-year-olds with NCAD, with their industrial design department, with their design department, working with these young people, not only with coding, but learning how to play, learning how to animate, learning how to film make. So they have a kind of their own self-expression that they understand. And we see not only their self-confidence and their sense of kind of self-belief, but we also see that they want to aspire and go to college and continue that disruption in their own lives. So future will look after itself. We need to listen to Niamh and Emmett about the present.
Carolyn.
Whereas all through, and I actually think we do need to think a lot about the future, especially in technology, because if anybody occasionally dips into the stuff that I write, I mean, we're in a pretty frightening place right now, because a lot of people aren't thinking about even short-term future, much less long-term future, and the implications of technologies and what they can do, what they might be able to do tomorrow, and what do we need to place in there today. A lot of that thought, I think, of what you need to do comes back to the thinkers that you create through the education system, through national perspectives on issues, on education, on culture. And what worries me a lot, I think, about Ireland right now are things like, the leaving cert, the focus on the leaving cert, and this, that you have 15-year-olds having to make decisions on what they're going to do for their intercert to go into the leaving cert. And you've basically, I've seen so many teenagers just crushed by this, and also becoming, and the mental anxiety. You pick your entire life for the next 4 years, and then all you see are your classmates, and you take nothing in other areas of education. And it is, I think, one of the strengths of the American system is that I had to spend, we go into college, and you don't have to decide on what you're actually going to study for 2 years, for better or for worse, but it means you spend a lot of time dabbling around, and you also have this huge range of breadth requirements you have to do. And again, coming back to Steve Jobs, I mean, Jobs mentioned this on, what technology companies of tomorrow, any business of tomorrow, doesn't want just the engineer that can code. You want the people with the arts background, the humanities background, the cultural knowledge to bring the depth and breadth to the services and the products.
So it's sort of a STEAM
tomorrow.
agenda, really.
Yeah, I would like to see something that's much broader. But I was also thinking about this idea of a center and an edge when you're thinking about past, present, and future. And I've seen Ireland change over 20 years from going from, just having low-level manufacturing, and people, you could be trained to sort of a low level of electronics manufacturing at a technology college, to having some of the most cutting-edge R&D facilities with big technology companies here, which in turn encouraged more companies to come. We have the Financial Services Center, a crazy idea of Charlie Haughey, and if that wasn't there, we probably wouldn't have the businesses we have here and the success we have. All of this in turn then brought in the new next generation internet companies, and now we've got really young startups. 5 years ago I would have said there's not really a startup economy here. Right now I say we have hit that tipping point. We have this very organic, growing, expanding world that I think is really exciting for young people growing up to work into, which means they can stay here, but it also means you work for Facebook, you're going to go over and work in Menlo Park. Like, this is really important too. A part of a very Irish thing is to leave Ireland and then come back, because you bring it back in skills. And this is, I think, an issue during the boom time. I know from from living with a technologist as well, that, it was really hard for companies to hire people with experience because everyone was staying in Ireland and everyone's parents were happy, because their child didn't have to go work in Germany or France or America. But now, now I think there's a much more fluid movement, and we don't get into quite the panic that we used to about immigration. And that's a strength too, I think, is the Irish ability to go away and then to want to come back.
Well, that's fantastic. It's very optimistic, I have to say. And I just like.
And I'm usually so cynical, but I am optimistic about this.
Let's not have a privacy.
And we say a very warm thanks to our panel, please, to Emmett, Niamh, Fiach, and Carlin. Thank you very much.